Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to a bit of a response video to a friend of the channel, Chris Mohan, who did a very interesting video which I'll leave a link to in the description below. And it was about what 6 films would you recommend to someone who is perhaps about to dip their toe in the world of non-English language films. Now, this exercise isn't meant to be kind of condescending and, we are somehow superior because we have films with subtitles, or art house films that aren't just mainstream Hollywood films. You like what you like. So this isn't a video about trying to convert people to different types of cinema. This is perhaps just an introduction, a suggestion for people that are willing to perhaps give other sorts of films a try. So I've picked 6 films and I'll try and explain my reasons for picking those 6 films. And again, you could probably do about 10 of these videos with different combinations of 6 films. So the first one is almost an anti-spectacle film. There's no car chases, there's no explosions, there's no guns. Because one of the questions that people sometimes ask is, well, why should I watch films from another country? I don't understand the culture, I'm not familiar with the way people in that country act. But how about a film that features something that we can all kind of identify with? It's a simple story, but just written and performed so beautifully. But it is kind of anti-cinema in the sense it is anti-spectacle. There's no soaring soundtrack, telling you how to think and how to feel about what's going on in the screen. And it's the Dardennes 2 Days, 1 Night with Marion Cotillard, who of course has made many English language films. This is, for me, the Dardenne brothers from Belgium, even though the film is in French. It's one of their finest works. It's a really simple tale of a woman, played by Marion Cotillard, strangely enough, who has had some health problems and is trying to go back to work. And the boss has said, well, you can have your job back, but the other workers will lose out their bonus. So if you can persuade the other workers to lose their bonus, you can have your job back. But if the workers vote for their bonus, unfortunately, you can't have your job back. So regardless of what country you're from, regardless of what language you speak, you can identify with Marion Cotillard's predicament. And more importantly, or equally importantly, you can put yourself in the shoes of the people who have their reasons for wanting their bonus. And one of the other great things about the film is the bonus is not this huge amount of, a ridiculously huge amount of money. It's not like €1 million or something like that. It's enough money to make a difference, but it's obviously not enough money to like retire on or anything like that. And everybody's reasons for making their decision is perfectly understandable. There's no moustache twirling villains in the film. Even from the company's point of view, the work is being done elsewhere in the world cheaper, so they have to cut costs and things like that. Now, people might say, well, why should I watch this? Because, cinema should be escapism. I shouldn't have to think when I'm watching a film. But if you choose to go down these rabbit holes and winding paths of non-English language cinema, you're going to find yourself enthralled and rooting for characters that, again, might not speak your language, but you can certainly empathise with them and root for them, and that's certainly the case of 2 Days, One Night. It's an absolutely brilliant film. Yes, the Dardenne style might take a little bit getting used to, as far as, again, it's not the cinema of spectacle. This is the cinema of characters with quandaries that they have to make moral decisions. It's absolutely riveting and just full of great performances and absolutely wonderful. Now, for the second film, we hear a lot nowadays about strong female characters, but strangely enough, strong female characters in films have been around longer than the last 5 years. If you look at the works of Ingmar Bergman, he's all about strong women, as is Saijit Ray. This is Charulata, or The Lonely Wife, from 1964, black and white, from India. And this is proof that not all Indian films are Bollywood. This is just a beautiful, delicate, poetic look at a woman who's married to a newspaper man who runs a newspaper, doesn't really have a lot of time for her, but as she's a bit bored, he asks his cousin, who's a bit of a poet, the wonderful Sumatra Chatterjee, who's one of Saijit Ray's regulars, to come and stay with them, to give his wife some companionship. And this really sparks her, and she starts to, she's already kind of looks at the world differently from the way she's supposed to, and the cousin's arrival just kind of amplifies that. So it's not a complicated story in any way. It's simple, but it's also quite beautiful. Saijit Ray is arguably one of the most underrated cinema masters, completely self-taught. He pretty much wrote all of his films, even though quite a lot of them are based on works of Indian literature. He did all the music in his films, and he just has a wonderfully kind of pastoral painter's eye, even though, again, his compositions are really quite effective, even though, as I say, he's not trained in cinema. But from his debut, Pather Panchali, he just had a natural eye for wonderful images, characters and stories. So I thought I would have a little bit of classic Hollywood. Now again, some people say, oh, why should I watch a black and white film? Why should I watch old films? You know, the fashion's dated. You know, sometimes the way they talk's dated. Their attitude to women, for example, is a little bit dated. Obviously, you just accept it. That's the time. But I'm actually going to include a comedy, one of my favourites, in probably the argument for the greatest film of all time, for me anyway, or my favourite film of all time. It was remade in 1983 by none other than Mel Brooks. Don't bother with the remake. This is To Be or Not to Be, one of Ernst Lubitsch's several masterpieces. 1942, starring Jack Benny and personal favourite Carole Lombard, who sadly this was her last film. She never actually saw it open. But I'll try not to cry in this video. This is supposed to be a happy introduction. So I'll try not to cry. This is fantastic. It's a bunch of actors during the Second World War trying to evade the Nazis and catch a spy and get out with their lives. It's just filled with jokes, filled with wonderful performances. Obviously the luminous Carole Lombard, Jack Benny, Robert Stack, who you may be familiar with from Airplane, with his many pairs of sunglasses. He plays a young pilot. It's just so quotable. It's literally perfect. It's got lots of Hamlet jokes if you're a Shakespeare fan. And if it doesn't make you laugh, there may be something wrong with you. But this video isn't judgmental. So the next film is French. It had a deep impact on me the first time I saw it, and still does. This is, I suppose, in the kind of horror genre. This was one of the films around Psycho in 1960. I would recommend Michael Powell's Peeping Tom in 1960. La Diabolique, as Chris mentioned in his video from 1955, which was the film Hitchcock desperately wanted to make. And we have 1958's Les Yeux Sans Visage, or Eyes Without a Face. Now this is visceral, so if you like horror films, this is one of the most strangest, most poetic horror film. Again, it's a concept, a story that we've heard so many times before and has been redone so many times in one form or another. It's about a plastic surgeon whose daughter is disfigured in a car accident that he is responsible for. So he kills young women and takes their faces off to try and graft it onto his daughter's face. Pierre Brasseur is absolutely fantastic as the Doctor. Lida Valley, who was immortal in The Third Man, she plays his purveyor of women, and she has her own little creepy tune as she drives around in her Citroen. Franjoy made some wonderful films like Jude X and one of the greatest documentaries of all time, The Blood of Beasts, which is shot in a slaughterhouse, an abattoir, which is fairly hard watching, but it is just one of the best documentaries ever made. This is just poetic, but it has lots of the, horror tropes. So if you're a horror fan, it might be a nice little French film to start you down the road of non-English language horror. It's very hypnotic as well. It's certainly paced. It has the pacing of a heartbeat that goes up and down at several moments. I've put in another French film, Sacre Bleu. It's Louis Malle's debut elevator to the gallows, or lift to the scaffold as I always called it, from 1958. It's hard to believe Louis Malle, this is his first film, one of the greatest debuts of all time, starring the wonderful Jean Moreau, who, if you do go down the French cinema rabbit hole, you'll see a lot of Jean Moreau, and also Maurice Ronet. But it's music of Miles Davis. It's Paris at night. Puddles reflected in the Pigalle. It's just atmospheric, smoky, absolutely beautiful. It's about two lovers, if you like that kind of thing, and murder. It just has a wonderful feeling of fatalism and Jean Moreau walking through the Paris streets. So another reason to watch non-English language films, if you're a fan of geography and other countries and cities and holiday destinations, you'll see all of these. But with the exception of the films of Jean-Pierre Melville, which who knows, we may get to at a later point, Paris in this film looks absolutely gorgeous, especially at night. And Moreau and Ronet as star-crossed lovers. It's just a beautiful film, 91 minutes long, perfectly paced, with a wonderful sting in the tail. You could do a lot worse than checking out Elevator to the Gallows, Louis Malle's debut, and who knows, it could be your French debut as well. And then actually a fairly modern one from 2019. This is just a little bit of sexy fun for all you kids out there. This is the Finnish film Dogs Don't Wear Pants. Now, on the surface, and certainly by the cover, you would think, okay, there's some naughty business going on here. But this is actually a heartfelt film about a man who loses his wife in a drowning accident. He has a child that he's bringing up, and he's kind of lost. He doesn't really know how to grieve. And he goes to this young lady who provides cinem services, and he takes one of those cinem services as she puts a bag over his head. And just as he's passing out, he sees visions of his wife, and it kind of helps him grieve. It helps him kind of get closer to her again. And despite, some S&M malarkey, use of hammers and things like that, it is a beautiful film. It's actually quite moving. And again, it's a perfect example of, not that mainstream Hollywood can't be quirky or whatever, or interesting, but this is just so good. It's one of my favourite quote-unquote modern films of the last 10 years. It just has a wonderful atmosphere of this idea of literally the underworld and places that you're not supposed to go. But despite that, despite all the S&M stuff, it really has a huge heart, and that's what elevates it to something special and something great, at least in my opinion. But again, my opinion is not fact. So thanks very much for watching. Hopefully Chris approves and doesn't demand that this video be stricken from the YouTube record. Again, this is supposed to just be little fun suggestions. This is not demands or anything like that, because again, picking 6 films is literally almost impossible. But that's a fair selection that should at least tweak your fancy. If people are allowed to tweak other people's fancies nowadays. Oh, the rules have changed so much. So thanks very much for watching. Again, I'll leave a link to Chris's original video, his original much better video than this one, in the description below. Please let me know what 6 introductory films you would give somebody to dip their toe in the world of non-English language cinema. And hopefully you'll join me again for more videos. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films saying farewell.